What happens when a Hollywood legend meets a daytime host who refuses to show respect? On live television, in front of millions, Joy Behar pushed Harrison Ford to the breaking point, mocking his age, questioning his talent, and ridiculing his career, until he finally stood up, defended himself with dignity, and walked away, leaving the entire studio stunned. You've never seen Harrison Ford like this before. Calm, collected, and then devastating. Joy Behar thought she could humiliate him on her turf, but the legend reminded everyone why he's still Indiana Jones at heart. This is the story of the day Hollywood met its match, and won. The studio lights blazed as the morning taping of The View began. Fans in the audience clutched their phones, hoping to catch a glimpse of the man who defined an era of cinema, Harrison Ford. At '82, he was promoting his final film as Indiana Jones, a bittersweet swan song to a career spanning decades. When he walked onto the stage, the crowd erupted into applause. Dressed in a crisp navy blazer, his trademark smirk just visible under his salt and pepper beard, Harrison waved modestly and sat down. "Welcome, Mr. Ford," Joy Behar began, her tone already sharper than usual, though it was hidden under her signature grin. "Or should I say, Grandpa Jones?" The audience chuckled nervously. Harrison raised his eyebrows but smiled politely. "Well, I guess age happens to the best of us," he replied, leaning back in his chair. Joy didn't wait a beat. "Does it? Or are you just clinging to relevance by dusting off the same old hat and whip? I mean, you've been playing this character since what? Before some of our viewers were even born?" The studio audience fell silent. Harrison folded his hands calmly and looked her in the eye. "I like to think that storytelling is timeless, Joy. At least that's what keeps audiences coming back to see these films." The other host shifted uncomfortably, exchanging glances. But Joy pressed on. "Or maybe," she said with a pointed laugh, "they come back because they're nostalgic for the old you, the one who wasn't, what's the word, wheezing his way through action scenes." A few gasps could be heard from the audience. Even the cameramen seemed to pause. Harrison let out a small chuckle, though his jaw tightened just slightly. "I can still outrun most people my age, and some younger too. You'd be surprised." Joy wasn't finished. She leaned closer. "Outrun them? Maybe. But outact them? That's another story. Do you really think your, how shall we put it, grumpy shtick still works in today's Hollywood?" Harrison leaned forward now, his expression calm but his eyes sharp. "Well, I'd say it works as long as people keep paying to see it, and they seem to." There was a smattering of applause from the audience, but Joy rolled her eyes and waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, please, that's just nostalgia talking. No one really cares about your kind of movies anymore." The temperature in the studio seemed to drop. Harrison sat back in his chair, resting one ankle over the opposite knee. His smile had faded, but his composure remained intact. "Well," he said softly, "I've always believed that people care about stories, and it seems to me, from the turnout at the box office, they still care about mine." Joy leaned back, a victorious smirk on her face. "We'll see how long that lasts, won't we?" Harrison simply nodded, as though he had heard it all before, but inside something was shifting. The legend was being tested, and everyone could feel it. Her chair tightened her grip on the stack of cue cards in front of her. Her eyes glinted, not with humor anymore, but with a pointed determination to push further. Harrison adjusted his cufflinks and glanced briefly toward the other hosts, who sat like statues, clearly unwilling to intervene. The air was thick with a kind of tension usually reserved for courtroom dramas. Joy smirked and continued, "Well, Harrison, you say people care about your stories, but don't you think at some point it's time to let go? To gracefully step aside? You've had a good run, but don't you feel ridiculous pretending to be an action hero at your age?" A few gasps and an audible "oof" came from the audience. Harrison blinked slowly. "Pretending, Bo?" he asked, his tone cool. "Well, Joy, acting is pretending, isn't it? That's the whole point of the craft, unless you thought all this was real?" The audience tittered nervously. Joy's smile tightened. "Oh, don't get clever with me, Harrison," she shot back. "What I mean is, when we watch you on screen these days, we're all just waiting to see if you break a hip." Laughter bubbled from the crowd. Nervous, awkward, not quite sure if they should. Harrison remained still, his fingers laced together in his lap, his expression neutral, but his eyes sharp as a whip. "I see," he said after a moment. "Well, I'm glad I can still keep people in suspense. That's good storytelling, I think." Joy leaned forward, unwilling to let go. "You know what I think? I think you've made a career out of playing the same angry, brooding man for 50 years, and everyone's too polite to tell you it's boring. You're boring now, Harrison. Don't you ever feel ashamed of showing up to collect a paycheck for the same role over and over? The words hung in the air like a dagger. Even the camera seemed to hesitate, their whirring fans audible in the dead silence that followed. Harrison didn't flinch. Shame, he repeated softly. No, Joy, not once. Because every time I show up, people show up with me. People who grew up watching those characters, who bring their kids and grandkids to watch them now. And for me, that's worth a little gray in my hair and some aches in my knees. The audience clapped timidly, but Joy cut through it with a dismissive wave. Please, Harrison, stop romanticizing it. You're just another overpaid movie star who's lucky the industry still humors you. Tell me, do you even enjoy acting anymore, or are you just addicted to the attention? At that, Harrison leaned forward, his voice low, deliberate. You know, Joy, I didn't come here today for your approval or for your diagnosis of my motivations. I came here to talk about a film, a story that my crew and I poured our hearts into. But you seem far more interested in tearing down the person telling the story than hearing about the story itself. Joy scoffed loudly. Oh, don't play the victim, Harrison. You've had more opportunities than anyone could dream of. But let's be honest, you're just a cranky old man clinging to what little relevance you have left. Harrison straightened his back, his eyes glinting now, though his voice remained calm. Maybe I am cranky. Maybe that's because I've seen enough in this business to know the difference between someone asking tough questions and someone who just enjoys being cruel. The audience erupted, this time with real applause, but Joy slammed her palm on the table to quiet them. Don't flatter yourself. You can't take criticism, and that's why you'll always just be another fragile ego in Hollywood. Harrison looked down at the table for a moment, then back up at Joy, his lips twitching into the faintest smile. I've taken plenty of criticism in my life, Joy, but I've never mistaken cruelty for honesty. And with that, he sat back, letting his words settle into the room like a hammer strike. The audience was riveted. The other hosts were silent, their eyes darting back and forth between the two. And Joy Behar? She leaned back in her chair, eyes narrowing, realizing that she might have finally awakened the full force of the man who had faced down every villain on screen, and was now facing her. The battle was far from over. But the legend had just drawn his line in the sand. The studio lights seemed to burn hotter as the silence stretched between them, a standoff that was now impossible to ignore. Joy leaned forward in her chair, her fingers tapping an impatient rhythm on the glossy table. Harrison remained upright and composed, though a faint tension in his jaw betrayed his restraint. Well, Joy finally said, her voice laced with derision, you always were good at pretending to be unbothered. That must come in handy, huh? Playing stoic heroes while secretly terrified everyone will figure out you're just another old man coasting on his name. The words sliced through the air like shards of glass. Several audience members gasped audibly. Even the producers in the control booth exchanged worried looks. This wasn't television anymore. This was a knife fight. Harrison tilted his head slightly, as though regarding an insect that had wandered onto his sleeve. His hands stayed neatly folded in front of him. You know, Joy, he began slowly, you have an impressive ability to reduce decades of work into a single insult. Almost like that's your real craft. Not comedy, not journalism, just bitterness. The audience murmured, some even clapping tentatively. Joy's cheeks flushed, but her smirk deepened. Oh, that's rich, she spat. Bitterness? No, Harrison. It's honesty. You're just not used to someone telling you the truth to your face. You've been pampered for so long you wouldn't recognize honesty if it punched you in the gut. He arched an eyebrow. I've been punched plenty of times, Joy. On screen, off screen. This doesn't even tickle. The audience chuckled, but Joy refused to let the moment slip away. You're not untouchable, she pressed, her voice rising slightly. You walk in here with your little smirk and your half whisper and you think you can charm your way out of everything. But here's the thing, you're not charming anymore. You're just sad. That word, sad, seemed to hang in the air longer than the rest. Harrison blinked once, then leaned forward ever so slightly. His voice remained low, measured, yet carried the weight of a storm waiting to break. Sad, isn't? He said. Well, let me tell you what I find sad, Joy. Sad is sitting here every morning, sneering at people you've never met, mocking the very things that others work their entire lives to build, just so you can feel a little taller in your chair. He gestured around the table. Sad is taking a platform that could inspire people, lift them up, and instead turning it into a firing squad. The other hosts, Whoopi, Sunny, and Sarah, sat frozen, wide-eyed, looking anywhere but at Joy. But Joy doubled down, slamming her palm on the table. "Oh, don't you dare lecture me, Harrison Ford. You think you're some kind of saint because you memorized a few lines and swung a whip around? Give me a break. You don't build anything. You don't help anyone. You just play pretend and collect checks while the rest of us do the real work." For the first time, Harrison's composure cracked. Just slightly. He exhaled, straightened, and pushed his chair back with a soft scrape against the floor. When he stood, the entire studio seemed to shrink under his presence. "You're right," he said quietly. "I do play pretend. But those stories, the ones you mock, they've given people hope. They've given kids heroes to look up to. They've brought families together in theaters for generations. That matters." His eyes locked on hers, unflinching. "You want to talk about building something? I've built characters and worlds that have lived far longer than your insults ever will. And unlike you, I don't tear people down to feel tall." "That's not work, Joy. That's just cruelty masquerading as wit." A ripple of applause broke out in the audience, this time louder, more confident. Joy's face darkened. "Oh, sit down, Harrison," she snapped. "You're being dramatic." But he didn't. He took one deliberate step toward her side of the table. "Dramatic," he repeated, his voice still quiet but deadly sharp. "You haven't seen dramatic yet, but keep going. I've got plenty more to say." And with that, the air in the studio thickened to the point of suffocation. Joy, perhaps realizing she had finally pushed too far, sat back slightly, though her eyes still burned with defiance. Harrison placed both hands flat on the table, leaning down just enough to bring himself to her level. "You've spent this entire interview trying to humiliate me, to chip away at me, as though it would make you look strong. But all it's done is show everyone here how small you really are." He straightened and adjusted his jacket. "I won't be part of your circus any longer." And with that, he turned his back to her and began to walk toward the exit. The studio audience erupted, some in applause, some in shocked silence. Joy called after him, her voice shrill now, but her words barely audible over the noise. And Harrison Ford kept walking, his dignity intact, leaving a stunned studio and a battered Joy Behar in his wake. The studio door loomed closer with each of Harrison's steady steps, his silhouette outlined by the blinding stage lights as he walked away from the chaos behind him. Each footfall seemed to echo louder than the last, punctuating the stunned silence left in his wake. Joy sat rigidly in her chair, her fingers gripping the edge of the table so tightly her knuckles turned white. For a few seconds she said nothing, just stared at the back of the man who had dismantled her, word by word, in front of millions. But then, as if realizing she was losing control of her stage, Joy shot to her feet. "That's right, Harrison," she barked, her voice cracking over the sound of murmuring audience members and shuffling producers. "Walk away like you've walked away from everything else. That's what you do, isn't it? You run when someone finally has the guts to call you out." Her words hung there like a sour fog, but this time Harrison stopped. He didn't turn around at first. Instead, he placed a hand lightly on the frame of the exit door, pausing, his back still to her. Slowly, deliberately, he turned, the studio lights catching the sharp edge of his expression. And when he spoke, his voice was calm, but it cut like steel. "You really don't get it, do you, Bito?" he said softly. Joy blinked, thrown by his tone, no longer angry, but almost disappointed. "You think this is about me running?" Harrison continued, his words carrying over the silent audience. "No, Joy. This is about me knowing when to stop playing a rigged game." He stepped forward, back toward the table, just a few paces, and fixed her with that famous stare, the one that had frozen stormtroopers and Nazis alike. "You've spent your whole career convincing yourself that cruelty is strength, that sarcasm is wit, that humiliation makes for good television. And maybe for a while people bought it. Maybe you even believed it." He glanced around the room, at the other hosts, at the crew, at the audience, and then back to her. "But all it's really done is leave you sitting in that chair every morning, tearing down people who built something while you just sit here and sneer at them." Joy opened her mouth to reply, but no words came out. "I've spent 50 years showing up, doing the work, bringing stories to life, giving people something to feel, whether it was bravery or adventure or courage when they needed it. And sure, not everyone liked me. Not every movie was perfect. But I showed up. His voice dropped even lower, quieter but sharper. And all you've shown today is how ugly it looks when someone stops pretending to be decent. The studio was dead silent now. Even the camera stopped moving, as if afraid to disrupt the moment. Joy folded her arms, forcing a scoff through the tension. You done with your speech, movie star? A faint, humorless smile tugged at the corner of Harrison's mouth. Yeah, he said, I'm done here. But you, Joy, you've still got to sit in that chair tomorrow. And the next day, and the day after that, you've still got to wake up and look in the mirror and pretend that what you're doing means something. He straightened, adjusted his jacket, and finally turned to leave. I hope someday you figure out what it feels like to actually create something, instead of just trying to destroy it. But until then, he let the words hang there, then gave a small shake of his head. I've got nothing left to say to you. And with that, he strode toward the exit, slow, deliberate, unshaken, while the audience began to murmur and clap, some standing as he passed by. One of the producers scrambled to intercept him at the door, whispering frantically, but Harrison simply raised a hand and kept walking. The door swung open and shut behind him with a soft but final click. Joy stood alone now, her face a patchwork of anger and something she couldn't quite hide. Shame. The remaining hosts exchanged awkward glances, no one daring to speak first. The audience sat in stunned silence, a few people capturing the aftermath on their phones. After what felt like an eternity, Joy sank slowly back into her chair, her gaze fixed on the empty space where Harrison had stood. In the control booth, someone finally had the sense to cut to commercial. But it was too late. The damage was done. The clip would be replayed on news shows, analyzed by commentators, and dissected on social media for weeks to come. Some would call it the day Harrison Ford ended Joy Behar. Others would say it was just another example of how toxic daytime television had become. But everyone agreed on one thing. That day, the man they called Indiana Jones walked out of the view with more dignity than the entire panel combined, and Joy Behar was left with nothing but the sound of the door closing and the weight of her own words echoing back at her. What did you think of this unforgettable showdown? Was Harrison Ford right to stand his ground and walk away? Or should he have stayed and endured the attacks? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another behind-the-scenes drama. Thanks for watching Echo Stories, where the real stories behind the headlines come alive.